benefit of being a tiny island nation cut off from the rest of the world? You can pretty much make up your own rules. A drawback to being a tiny island nation cut off from the rest of the world? Just occasionally, you can develop a superiority complex that, teamed with a massive military and a take no prisoners and never surrender attitude, can result in a horrific war and retaliation in the shape of a mushroom cloud. So let's take a look at Japan, the land of the rising sun, the citizens of which had always viewed themselves in time past as a special people, a breed apart. This has been, in large part, due to the physical separation of the Japanese home islands from the rest of the world. Even after trade and communication between the Japanese islands and the mainland were possible, the Japanese shoguns demanded complete separation from, well, everyone else. In theory, this would avoid tainting the pure Japanese culture with contact from lesser beings, again, everyone else. The samurai culture best sums up ancient Japanese tradition. Samurai means to serve, which is exactly what ancient samurai really were. Warrior servants to a noble lord, they summed up the essence of Japanese culture: obedience to authority, honor, and military might. Japan was finally forced to interact with the rest of the world when the ships of Commodore Perry from the good old United States sailed into Tokyo Bay and demanded, at gunpoint, that the Japanese join in international trade. The Japanese reluctantly complied at first, but during the so-called Meiji period came to embrace the modern industrial age. They gained several advantageous things from international trade, including modern weapons and tactics, while keeping the sense of honor and militaristic thinking that had always been hallmarks of the samurai. Although not all Japanese were happy with the changing society, especially the samurai class. Unfortunately, among many Japanese, there was also still a sense that all foreigners are a type of subhuman, not to be trusted or respected. Add that to a firm belief that the Japanese emperor was almost literally a god on earth, and a government starting to look out at the rest of the South Pacific like a starving man looking in the window of a steak and shake, and you've got a recipe for a whole lot of nastiness. Determined to stand tall among the nations of the world, Japan lacked only one thing: resources, especially fuel, to power their military machine. They decided to take it from nearby Korea and China. The attacks began with the unheralded bombing of Shanghai, but most famously in the so-called Rape of Nanking. When Japanese soldiers captured the former Chinese capital, they participated in grisly conduct, including systematic rape and murder. Of course, none of this went exactly unnoticed by the rest of the world. The United States instituted an embargo of materials Japan needed, specifically oil. And if it's one thing an army bent on world domination needs, it's gasoline to fuel their ships, tanks, and planes. Also, to show that they meant business, the U.S. Pacific Fleet moved from its former base at San Francisco to a base a whole lot closer to Japan, Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands. Japan, sorely needing the denied materials from the United States, foresaw inevitable conflict and decided to go ahead and get the combat ball rolling. The commander of the Japanese Navy, an American-educated admiral named Yamamoto, argued that they needed to strike first and hard in order to stand any chance against the American armed forces, and that would include a first strike to cripple the American fleet lying at Pearl Harbor. The attack on December 7th, 1941, when it comes, finds an ill-prepared American fleet riding at anchor on a quiet Sunday morning. The battleships are lined up in neat rows, as are the American bombers and planes on the airfields. Most are heavily damaged, if not destroyed outright in the attack. Yamamoto knows that Pearl Harbor is merely the opening gambit of a failing enterprise. By fate, the American carriers were out of port, and thus were spared, and most of the damaged ships would float and fight again before long. He fears he has merely woken a sleeping giant, and filled it with a terrible resolve.